Welcome back to From the Couch Sports. Get into the New York Jets offseason. It's funny. I'm planning on making a video just to break down, positions that I think we need to improve on. Say kind of what the Jets staff and what the media is kind of scared to say on certain Jets topics. But to start things off, obviously we have the big news that the Jets are parting ways with Mike LaFleur. In other words, he got fired, but he's buddies with the head coach, so they want to let him go away, on peaceful terms, per se. Basically, they're saying that teams are calling about Mike LaFleur, inquiring about his availability. I find it very hard to believe that this would be any kind of vertical move for LaFleur. I don't think there's any chance that a team would hire him to become their head coach after what he's done as an offensive coordinator. So if anything, teams are inquiring about either keeping him as an offensive coordinator, which would be just a swap of the same job title, or he's going to take a demotion. So for the Jets to say this is like a mutual agreement, they're parting ways for his best interest, that might be the case if he was like in line to get a head coaching position or something like that. But that's not what's happening. He was a horrible coach. Just to put it frank, we brought on a guy that, learned from the Shanahan system, which has shown to be hit or miss. Because some of the guys that are brought on through the system, like McVay, that learn under the Shanahans, they go on to succeed and be great coaches. But in this situation, Mike LaFleur clearly wasn't that. And we can talk about different things. Like, there's some Jets fans that want to defend the fact that we had, turnstiles on the offensive line, so many different lineups because of injuries. And I totally understand that, but it's part of football. Every single year, you're going to have starters that go out for the entire season due to injury. You're going to have key players miss big portions of the season. This happens on every NFL team. So I think it's kind of a weak excuse for an offensive coordinator just really underperforming and essentially ruining a number 2 overall pick. Somebody has to be fired for it. You can't just, keep going with everything and do the whole, we're gonna try to develop Zack in his 3rd season in the NFL. No, the coaching staff just made horrible decisions with some of the choices. Mike LaFleur, a guy who has never called plays before, has no ties to actually developing a quarterback, should not have been the guy that you choose to lead the offense with a number 2 overall quarterback. It just doesn't make sense. When you bring on a quarterback coach in Rob Calabrese, a guy that had time as like an assistant on the Broncos for a couple years, a team that did not have good quarterback play, and before that, he was a quarterback coach on a tiny college like Wagner. Those are just dumb decisions. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you bring those level of coaches in to coach the number 2 overall pick? This guy that was supposedly the most pro-ready quarterback in the draft class. So, I'm perfectly fine with the firing of LaFleur. I'm glad that they're kind of clearing out some of the offensive staff. They're going to bring in, hopefully more of a proven coordinator. I would prefer a guy like Frank Reich, or, there's been rumors of Kubiak coming back. Someone that's either been a head coach or at least a coordinator in the past. I don't want another guy that's like a QB coach right now that's never called plays before coming over to be that. It just doesn't make sense. I think this franchise needs to make the right decision now, because we're going to be coming into a year where Douglas and Saleh will probably be on the hot seat. Whether that's justified or not, I feel like they should be given plenty of time. But this team has proven Douglas has put together a playoff level roster, and the coaching has failed it. So I'm perfectly fine with getting rid of LaFleur. I think it's funny that the Jets have to play this, media narrative as if they didn't just fire the guy. Like, he got fired. I get that you guys have a good relationship with him. You want to leave on good terms. Cool, I understand that. But he got fired for poor performance. You know, one of the other rumors that's out there it's been disputed by both the Jets front office and like head coaching and Saleh, and it's also been disputed by Woody Johnson. But apparently Saleh and some of the other people in the front office were, split on keeping LaFleur. They wanted to do it, and Woody Johnson basically forced their hand. I don't know the truth to this or not. I am a firm believer that the owner of the team should stay out and allow the football people to make football decisions. But also, in this situation, I feel like Robert Saleh was, willing to drown with the ship. And, this is his buddy. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned before this guy was in his wedding and everything like that. I think his best man was LaFleur's brother. And so it's like, if you're gonna put your friendship over your career, then yeah, the owner should step in and make you make the right decision. Like I would expect a good owner to do that. I'm not saying that Woody Johnson's a phenomenal owner or anything. We all know that there's certainly room for improvement, and we've had plenty of things to be upset about, like the hiring of Adam Gase and some of the other boneheaded decisions that this owner has allowed in the past. But this one, in my opinion, is not one of those choices. So yeah, I'm happy with the direction that we're going. I'm hoping that we bring on a legit coordinator. I know there's going to be other Jets podcasts and everything that will break down the candidates and everything like that. And these interviews will probably go pretty quickly. The one thing that's going to be interesting, though, is hiring a coordinator when you don't have a quarterback. So whatever coordinator is going to come on, he's going to clearly know the situation that he's getting into. He's coming in with a head coach GM duo that might be on the hot seat if they don't make the playoffs next year. I know Woody Johnson said there's no playoff mandate. I can't remember the last time. I can't remember a time where he's ever mandated the playoffs. We haven't been there for 12 years, so maybe he should. But here we are again, and most people would think that it's playoffs or bust. So OC coming in, he's going to know that. He's going to need to be tied to a good quarterback, I think, at the end of the day. This narrative with Zack Wilson, I feel like most Jets fans just they're not grasping the full picture of things and the business side of the NFL. So everybody from Zack Wilson's having the soundbite saying, if the Jets bring on a veteran quarterback, I'm going to make his life hell. He's saying all the right stuff. Saleh, Douglas, they're saying, we really believe in this kid. We want to properly develop him. But all roads seem to be leading to a veteran quarterback being brought on, and somehow what they want us to believe is that Zack Wilson is going to come in, sit the bench in his third year in his career, and develop as if this is a rookie quarterback that's sitting behind Alex Smith like Mahomes was, or Rodgers behind Favre. But what everybody's failing to understand is this guy is going to be in the third year of his NFL career, and he was the second overall pick. I want people to come up with examples of players that have succeeded in this situation before. I don't think I've ever seen a player who was drafted this high play and start 2 seasons before getting benched for a practice squad quarterback, and then getting benched to play out his third year, and then from that point on becoming a good quarterback. It's absurd to think that that's something that's possible. Nobody has ever done that. Like, there's a few like small examples of quarterbacks that started their career off this badly that actually turned out to have decent careers. Some of them are, from like the 80s. So we're talking about maybe like a Troy Aikman, or I think Steve Young started his career off tough. These are situations that happened like 30 years ago. This Zack Wilson wasn't even alive when these things happened. Anything in the modern era, I guess Kurt Warner, this is another thing, 20 years ago at this point. Like, there's nothing in recent memory that shows that you can go from being historically bad to somehow learning in your third year to develop and become a good quarterback after that. Like, I think the reality of it, and what most Jets fans don't want to admit, is that the Jets are done with Zack Wilson. Zack Wilson's not going to be the Jets quarterback anymore. It just doesn't make any sense for him to continue to be the quarterback. They're getting a new offensive coordinator anyways, so why not just trade him and allow him to restart his career and see if he can live up to his potential somewhere else? Because everything that we've ever seen has shown that he's not going to live up to the potential here. We have not been able to develop another rookie quarterback, and we've tried multiple times. It's just this Jets franchise does not do good at it. And like at this point, it shouldn't take 3 years for you to see something from a guy that you drafted number 2 overall, who was supposedly the most pro-ready quarterback. It doesn't make any sense. And the Jets franchise, they're not going to come out. They keep everything close to the vest. They're not going to come out and publicly say, Zack Wilson's playing like Ryan Leaf. This guy has stats that match those of Jamarcus Russell's first 22 starts. No, they're going to say the things that they say. They believe in this guy. This guy has great work ethic, this and that. And then they're going to trade him to a team and try to fleece them. They're going to try to get the most value that they can get for a guy that they benched for the 4th string quarterback. Just think about that. This isn't a guy who got hurt, or this isn't a situation where you've got a backup quarterback who's just playing lights out, winning every game. Because we saw that's not who Mike White is either. This is a situation where Zack Wilson was so bad that he got benched to he wasn't even suiting for games. He was benched for Chris Streveler, a guy who literally sat on our practice squad the entire season. But we really seem to believe that this team is not going to feel confident that Zack Wilson can be the backup quarterback next year, let alone start in the future. Why would they feel confident keeping him on the roster? Yes, they used a big draft pick on him, but at the end of the day, if you can go and you can bring in a big veteran quarterback, nobody is going to care about Zack Wilson. If you go and you trade for Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, nobody will even remember Zack Wilson. I want everybody to remember a few years back, the Denver Broncos, they had Josh McDaniels, and they drafted a quarterback, Tim Tebow, in the first round, a guy who probably shouldn't have been taken in the first round. But he came on, and he led the Broncos to a playoff win. He took them into the playoffs and led them to a crazy playoff win in overtime over the Steelers. And then the next offseason, the Broncos had a chance to get a better quarterback, and they took Peyton Manning, and nobody cared that Tim Tebow just took them to the playoffs. And that's a guy who took them to the playoffs, and they dumped him like nothing. This is a guy who has been historically bad and has not shown anything this entire year, for the most part, in Zack Wilson. So if there's the right quarterback is brought in, nobody's going to care about Zack anymore. They can throw him away. They can trade him for picks. It's unfortunate because I can't understand where things fell off. Because for Zack, he had a ton of talent around him. It seemed that they brought in, LaFleur wasn't great, but I don't think he was the worst offensive coordinator in football or anything like that. It didn't pan out. Zack Wilson struggled with some kind of simple things. I feel like it might have stemmed from the injury. Maybe he came back and was timid after getting hurt, not wanting to get hurt again. But clearly I think it's time for the franchise to move on. And going into this offseason, there's a few veteran quarterbacks that you have to have one of them. Otherwise, next year is going to be another disaster. Here we could be in 3 months, and we could probably know where things are going to go because we will or we will not have one of these quarterbacks on the roster. And those quarterbacks are, first, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is playing on the 5th-year option. He clearly doesn't want to go play for the Ravens again. This is a team that has refused to extend him. They've had plenty of time to do it, and they keep holding off on it. He ends up getting a knee injury that was supposed to be at 3 weeks, and he's been out 6 weeks now and counting. So he's clearly, if he was under contract and long term, he'd probably be playing in the wild card this weekend. But he's not gonna be. It doesn't seem like the Ravens are in line to sign him long term, and I think there's a big chance that he gets traded. Obviously Jets fans are gonna bring up the fact that he's only played 12 games the last 2 years. He's shown he is more of a running style quarterback, so who knows how that his longevity is gonna be. I understand that sentiment, but on the same hand, this is a quarterback who won MVP, led the league in touchdowns that year throwing the football. If you have the option to get an MVP candidate, then you do it 100% of the time. You take the risk. It's well worth the risk, because if you have Lamar Jackson healthy for 12 games next year, you got a good chance of going 12-0 in those 12 games. You have a good chance of making the playoffs. And at this point, that's all that we should care about, is making the playoffs, getting into the playoffs, and then we'll go from there. But apart from Lamar, Aaron Rodgers is another guy that he did see a dip in production this year. He had no weapons on offense outside of the running backs and Lazard. I know Christian Watson kind of came on, but he didn't play the whole season, and Aaron Rodgers clearly didn't have the weapons he had in years past, and he also played with a broken thumb. So if you can get Aaron Rodgers another 2-time MVP, actually I think he might even have more than 2 MVPs. He did win back-to-back MVPs recently. He's a guy that you bring on immediately, and there's also rumor of Hackett becoming the OC. I think he's better suited at a position like that than clearly head coach, because he was awful with the Broncos. But if you bring on someone that maybe has some experience with Rodgers, that's a home run. If you do whatever it takes to get Rodgers or Lamar, both of those guys could lead you to a Super Bowl, and you have the defense and everything in place to potentially make that happen. And then, so if we don't get either of these guys, which in my opinion, I really don't believe we will. Being a Jets fan, having super high expectations is crazy. It's just not worth it usually. The more realistic options are Derek Carr and Jimmy G. Derek Carr, to me, I think Derek Carr, statistically, if you put Derek Carr's stats compared to ex-Jets quarterbacks, he'd be the best Jets QB of all time. So it's funny because you see Jets fans that are completely against Derek Carr, a guy he's had, I'm pretty sure on average, the worst defense in football since he got drafted. So the Raiders have been horrible at defense year in, year out, and this is a guy he's consistently been healthy, and he's put up good stats. I mean, if we had a QB throw for 24 touchdowns and 10 picks, that'd be one of the better years that we've had at quarterback. Yards-wise, he'd be like his top 5 seasons, they'd all be in the top 10 of the Jets. So he's certainly a guy I think you got to make a play for. There's rumors that he's going to get cut right after the Super Bowl, like 2 or 3 days before the new league year starts. If not, he has a no-trade clause, so if he has interest in coming to the Jets, they could make a trade for him. I don't think that the value would be crazy in comparison to Lamar or Rodgers, who are probably going to demand first-round picks and more. For Derek Carr, I would imagine it's a lesser pick, because if they don't trade him, then he's just going to get cut and sign elsewhere. And then the other one, this I would be the least happy with of all of these options, is Jimmy G. Jimmy G, I think, with LaFleur gone, I think the chances of him coming to the Jets are a little bit less, even though he does have the experience with Salah. But just his health. When he plays and he's healthy, he's the type of guy that could lead us to the playoffs. That's what we're shooting for. whether or not he could win a Super Bowl, that's still to be decided. Obviously, he won with being the backup in New England, but to be the guy, I don't know if that's something he can do. But also, he has not shown that he can stay on the field. I want to say he's missed like 40 to 50% of the games that he's been on the 49ers. So he would be kind of last ditch. We can't get any of these other guys. Then you go Jimmy G. The other options that are kind of being talked out there. Tom Brady is not coming to the Jets. This is a guy who was literally the Jets' rival for 20 years. I don't even know if he's ever said a single good thing about the Jets. And he's literally, if he even plays next year, he's got like maybe a year or two left. There's no way that he's going to retire as a Jet. That just makes no sense. He's going to go to a warmer weather city, either stay in Tampa, go to Vegas, something like that, or if he does go back to a cold weather team, he's going to return to New England, which I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably Tampa, Vegas, possibly Miami, but it's certainly not the Jets. So get that out of your head. And then the other, like, it's just the Jets fan base is starving for a quarterback so bad that fans will see something from Baker Mayfield, and they'll want Baker Mayfield on the Jets. The Baker Mayfield that literally got traded away for nothing. The Browns wanted to move on from him. This is a guy who had the best running game in football, the best OLine, had a great defense, and the Browns were just quick to move on from him. They didn't want anything to do with him. And then he lost his job in Carolina to an XFL quarterback. I think for Baker, what's best for him is probably staying with the Rams. Matthew Stafford has some question marks about the future of his career, so it makes perfect sense for Baker to stay there. They have the great offensive mind. If he's going to succeed somewhere, it's probably there. And then some of the other names, like Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is a good backup quarterback, but he's not a starter. If he was a starter, he'd be starting. Like, he has not shown that he can be a starting level quarterback. I know if you look at his stats, they're not horrible, but there's reasons that he's a backup and that he hasn't been given that opportunity already. And then, like, the Jets are not going to bring back Geno Smith or Sam Darnold. I've seen Jets fans asking for that. Geno, I think, has done enough for Seattle to give him a contract extension and for him to stay there as, the future quarterback, at least for the next couple seasons. And then Sam Darnold, I don't know where he's going to end up. I like Sam. I think he's a good guy, but I don't see that happening for either Sam or for the franchise after we moved on from him. So it really is. It comes down to the Lamar, Rodgers, Derek Carr, or Jimmy G. If we don't get any of those guys, we are going to be in a terrible position in this offseason. And what it's going to do is it's going to force the New York Jets to trade up and draft a quarterback. And so right now the Chicago Bears own the first overall pick. Trading from 13 to 1 would take a massive amount of picks, probably 3 firsts. And I don't know if I doubt that they believe that much in Bryce Young. If this was the year with Caleb Williams coming out, maybe that's something they're willing to do. But if it also was that year, then the Bears probably just take him. I know the Bears like Justin Fields, so there's a good chance they trade that pick. But if they don't, then basically the Jets are going to have to trade up over whoever else is there. Depending on what happens with the Bears at 1, the Texans need a quarterback. So we could see 2 QBs go back-to-back in Young and Stroud. Otherwise, I think the Colts are 4 or 5. So the Jets would probably have to trade up over them because the Colts are probably going to draft a quarterback if one of those guys is available. So it leaves us in an absolutely terrible position. So ideally, you get rid of the first round pick and you go out and you get a real quarterback, and then you trade Zack Wilson for whatever you can get for him. You bring in a veteran backup, a guy like Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, one of those guys that even Mike White to an extent showed this, but I just don't I don't think you can be comfortable with him if you have to start him for, more than 2-3 games. Um, but yeah, you bring in one of those guys who can win you a couple games if your QB goes out, and then you try to build with whatever assets you have remaining, get a couple other pieces in the draft. Um, at receiver right now, we do have some question marks. I think of a lot of it was quarterback play and the offense that has kind of held back, like a guy like Elijah Moore, a guy like Denzel Mims. These guys could be legit weapons that we didn't get to see it because we didn't have a good offense. And so I think there's a chance they, kind of emerge next year depending on what happens offensively. Um, Now Corey Davis, I think, is the big question, and I really like Corey Davis, but he's struggled to stay on the field most of his career. He can't stay healthy, and then when he does play, it's really he's either having a big game, making big catches, or he's just having drops. And so possibly pardon from Corey Davis. There's gonna be veteran wide receivers available that are good and arguably better than him. Right now, DeAndre Hopkins is supposedly on the trade block. He's literally one of the best receivers in football. If you can go out and get him for a reasonable draft pick and get a quarterback, I mean it's a no-brainer. If you could go and get Aaron Rodgers and D-Hop, this is a Super Bowl contending team next year. You do whatever it takes to do that. At this point, we should be in the screw them picks mode. Just like the Rams were a couple years ago. You go out and you buy a Super Bowl. Us Jets fans have been struggling for 50 years to see a good football team, and we've seen good football teams like a handful of years out of the last 50. We need to put a team on the field next year that can compete. And if we don't, then they're going to blow it all up again like they've been doing. So I definitely, if you could make any of those moves happen, you do in a heartbeat. You just do. You don't think about your future draft picks. You think about now and winning football games. And then, we'll get into the offensive line, and then we'll finish talking about the defense a little bit. The offensive line is going to go through a lot of changes this offseason. So George Fant probably isn't coming back. I know last year he was big on wanting a contract extension because he played really well, and then he didn't play that well at all this season. So if he's brought back, I don't think it's at the value that he seemed to want early in the season. So I don't know if he's coming back. Dwayne Brown, he's just older. So whether he's going to come back or not, I know he has to get shoulder surgery. I thought he played well when he was healthy. I know he played well like with a torn shoulder for most of the year actually. So we'll see if he comes back. I think they signed him to a 2-year deal, but he's also at the age where he could very well just retire after a disappointing final season. So it kind of leaves the tackle spot up in the air as far as making moves. They probably bring on a free agent, maybe try to use one of their draft picks towards drafting a tackle. I think that Mekhi Becton has a chance to be the guy. I really don't understand, where Jets fans are at with Mekhi, and it's kind of shitty. Like, this is a guy who could literally become one of the best tackles in football. He is just a massive human being, and he's in that he's like one of the bigger tackles like to ever play the game of football, and he's a freak athlete too, which is what people seem to forget. And as a rookie, this guy was like a Pro Bowl level tackle, and people just forget it because he got hurt. He got hurt, went through all the nonsense with LaFleur and the offense that they've had in the last 2 years. And he had 2 season-ending knee injuries. And people want to just bag on him about his weight. None of the fans have actually seen the man step on a scale. So just sitting there talking about his weight, calling him a bust because he's been hurt, it's just ridiculous. obviously he's coming in the year 4 and he's only played one season, so do the Jets they're not going to be in a hurry to retain him or anything like that. I understand. I'm going to be realistic. But you can't just ignore the fact that the guy is tremendously talented, and you can't act like he's a bust or that he doesn't work hard or something because you don't actually know the man. I mean, this guy was pumping out videos all off season of him just lifting heavy. He looked like he was massive. And then he comes in and they like the beat reporters just say some nonsense about his weight. And then he shows that he loses weight before training camp, and then he gets hurt again, and it's just like it. And then the medical staff botches it, acts like it's not that serious, and then it does become serious. So we have had just all of these, injuries, and it sucked, and it's certainly hurt his career, and I understand that. But to call him a bust because of injury, he's not a bust. He's had horrible luck. He might not be able to stay healthy because of the size he is. Some humans that are just really tall. I mean, we see it a lot more in basketball, like these 7-footers and up. They struggle to stay healthy. A lot of linemen in the NFL, the big tall ones, they struggle to stay healthy. So I get it. He might struggle to stay healthy, but if he can stay healthy, he's going to be an elite tackle. And whatever quarterback is playing there next year, and whatever side he's on, that quarterback is going to be happy that he has Mekhi Becton, because this is a guy who held his own against the Defensive Player of the Year and Nick Bosa. Mekhi Becton played lights out against him as a rookie. People are just quick to write this guy off, and I understand because of the injury history and everything. The Jets are going to have some sort of backup. They can't go into the season expecting him to be their starter for 17 games, and it's understandable. But also, if he does start, they're going to have a great player that we didn't have this last year, and it's going to make a huge difference. Just like Elijah Vera Tucker coming back, Mekhi Becton coming back could be a big difference maker next year. And then I want to talk about Laken Tomlinson. Laken Tomlinson has been getting, just trashed on by the fan base and everything. And I totally understand people wanting to cut bait with him after a season because he didn't have a great year. It's the truth. I'm sure he'd admit it as well. But also, he's played very well in the past. So this year was kind of an outlier of him playing badly. I think it's something where he could potentially bounce back and be good next year. A lot of times these offensive lines take some time to gel before they're like truly elite. So it could be something like that. But we'll see where the organization wants to go with it. The center position, Connor McGovern, I'd be curious to see. I would imagine we try to bring him back. It's not guaranteed, though. So if there's an option out there that Douglas likes more, then I could see him trying to go out for that. Maybe getting a little younger. Or if there's someone they just think is better than him, then they'll probably go that route. But now, to get into defense, there's not a whole lot. Like, the defense, it's funny because the defense is really, you have a couple really great players, and then you've got a few like good players and then a couple big holes, but those holes were covered up with because you had Sauce, you had DJ Reed, Quinnen Williams. To start off the off season, Quinnen Williams needs to get paid. They need to just throw whatever amount of money he wants, pay the man. He is arguably the best defensive tackle in football. I know Aaron Donald was hurt part of the year, but as far as this season goes, Quinnen Williams is arguably the best D tackle in football. I don't think that's too crazy to say. He deserves to get paid. I get maybe not paying him $30 million a year or whatever Aaron Donald's making, but pay him whatever he needs to get paid, what he wants. Keep him on the Jets, and then at the right price, I would love to keep Quincy Williams. I think it's cool that they're brothers, and I think they're both also pretty good football players. Quincy surely has Quincy and Quan Alexander. They they make their mistakes, certainly, and we could use some extra help, maybe bringing on another linebacker. But they both played really well this year, and I'd like to bring them both back if possible. Bringing in the safety to replace Lamarcus Joyner, I think, is something that needs to be done. He would bet he was on the fence about retiring last year. I know he's getting a little up there in age. I'm not against bringing him back if he's more of a depth piece, but I think at this point in his career and for the Jets defense, I think bringing on another safety would be great. On the D line, I think Bryce Huff, they got to try to bring him back if possible. He's shown a ton of potential. He's one of our best pass rushers, and he didn't play a whole lot of snaps like he should have. And then, some fans are going to want to get rid of Carl Lawson. I think Carl Lawson played pretty well considering coming off of an Achilles tear, so I'm not against keeping him and seeing him play next year. And I think the other thing that people were just expecting, we pay a guy $15 million a year, he's going to come out and get their 15 sacks a season. I think if Carl Lawson can get you 8 to 12, then you're in a good spot. Like $15 million a year, it might be it's not like the amount you pay for Nick Bosa or something like that. It might be a little bit more than the production, but at the end of the day, getting after the quarterback, having edge rushers, especially with a good rotation, I think it's important. I do want to see Jermaine Johnson get more involved next season, though. So they could see, parting ways with one of these veteran guys in order to make that happen. But I really like where the defensive line is at. Maybe bringing on another D tackle, but also clearly, most importantly, extending Quinnen. Corners we're locked down at corner unless they want to add some depth or something like that. And then 100% we need help on special teams this year. I'm not in the boat of firing Boyer because he's been a great special teams coordinator. Greg Zuerlein, great season this year. I'm all for bringing him back. Braden Mann has tremendously overwhelmed. He has not been good. This is a guy who underwhelmed, I should say. This is a guy who we drafted to be the guy, and there's certain times where he's great, and then there's other times where he's just horrible. And the Pats game, we literally lost the game because he shanked a punt. So that needs we need to at least bring on someone to compete. If Braden Mann can play at his the best of his ability weekly, then cool. But he hasn't shown the ability to do that. So bringing on another punter, and then also return man. Braxton Berrios should not be on the Jets next year. This is a guy we brought back after he had a great year last year as a returner, and then he didn't do. I can't even remember a single good return all year. It was almost every punt was a fair catch. Hardly ever ran out of the end zone on kick returns. He didn't make the explosive plays he did last year. And then to make matters worse, we used him a lot as a receiver, and he was a major liability. He was taking end-around runs and, designed plays for him. They should have been going to Elijah Moore, a guy who's clearly a better receiver. He literally lost us the Vikings game by dropping the ball in the end zone. It's just the franchise needs to part ways. That was one of the free agent signings that was bad. He's mostly a special teams guy. You can find those guys. You can go get a great returner. Like we saw the Jags, they have the guy Jamal Agnew. He had a great year. You can go out and get a guy like that can be a spot, receiver here and there when you need him, but a guy that's more dedicated to, creating plays when he's returning the football. I think that's certainly something that you do, or at minimum you get a receiver that can return better. Berrios shouldn't be on the roster next year, in my opinion. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up, most everything. once the draft kind of comes around, more draft content, I'll be working on that. Break down prospects that I think will fit with the Jets and things like that. But ultimately, quarterback is key this offseason. You get a good quarterback, you get an offensive coordinator, you go out get another weapon on offense, and you pay Quinnen Williams whatever it takes to keep him. And then I think next year you make a Super Bowl run if you get the right quarterback. But that's all I got to say today. Let me know your opinion on this offseason. What was I wrong about? What would you do if you were Joe Douglas's shoes? But as always, thanks for tuning in. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. If you're a Jets fan, stay tuned for more.